All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our second welcome webinar of the summer, the Transfer Student Course Registration and Academic Advising webinar. My name is Nick Dietrich, and I work in the Office of New Student and Transition Services here at the Colorado School of Mines. And we're the office that puts on the welcome webinars for our incoming students. Today, you'll have a chance to meet with a couple different offices here on this webinar, specifically focused on transfer student course registration and how academic advising will work here at Mines, specifically for our incoming transfer students. So today we have about an hour together of time. We'll try our best to leave about 15 minutes of time at the end of our webinar today for you to be able to have a facilitated Q&A session that I will kind of work with our campus partners with answering your questions. So on the webinar, you'll see a Q&A box on the bottom of your screen. Feel free to submit your questions throughout the time that we have today together. And we have folks in the background kind of helping to monitor those questions. And then we'll have, again, some dedicated time at the end to kind of go through those questions. You might see some questions also answered in real time by some folks in the back end as well. But that's the place that you want to submit any questions that you have throughout your time here in this webinar. And again, we'll try our best to get to those questions by the end of our time together today. But without further ado, we're going to get our webinar started with the Center for Academic Services and Advising. And I'm going to introduce Jenny to you all, who will kick off the webinar.
Hi, and welcome. My name is Jenny Gambach, and I am an assistant director in CASA, the Center for Academic Services and Advising here at Mines. I'm joined today by some of my colleagues from CASA in the Registrar's office, and as Nick mentioned, they're here to make sure your questions get answered. So, as he mentioned, we have some time at the end, but don't be shy about popping those questions into the Q&A feature as we go along. So you can see the agenda for the day here. So we're going to discuss how to review your college credit, review some of those key tools for understanding your degree requirements and registering for classes, discuss some next steps for getting some one-on-one advising support, and finally just learn a little bit more about CASA and the Registrar's office in general. So with that, I am going to head and start my screen share. All right, can I get a thumbs up if anyone can see that?
You're good to go, Jenny.
Okay, great. So as you can see, we are starting off in the Canvas site for incoming students. So Canvas is Mine's learning management system. So you're going to be in Canvas pretty regularly for a lot of your classes. You can get to your Canvas from the tile at my.mines.edu. And this webinar is designed to give kind of a little more nuanced visual presentation of some of the information posted in the articles you see here. So after the webinar, if you need to reference something that was covered, you can always come back and read through the associated article. If you are not seeing this Canvas site in your Canvas page, just shoot CASA at mines.edu an email and we'll make sure to get you loaded into the site. Okay, so let's dive right in. So the first thing we want you to do is review the transfer credit that you have been awarded. So you can't do that until you have sent official transcripts over to Mines. So try to do that ASAP if you haven't already. I would say even if you're currently enrolled in summer classes, we would recommend that you still send some official transcripts now for any classes that have been completed, and then again after summer grades are posted to get the additional coursework transferred. And the reason for that is just getting that bulk of your transfer credit evaluated now. It's going to help ensure you don't get any surprises come fall, and both you and your advisor just have a better idea of where things stand so you can get the best possible plan together. And then you also won't have to worry as much about potentially needing to submit prerequisite overrides, which is something we'll talk about a little bit later on in the presentation. So to review your transfer credits, and if you're on a computer with a big old monitor right now, definitely encourage you to follow along if you'd like. But we're going to start in Trailhead. So Trailhead and My.Mines are kind of your two home bases for a lot of your different software and technology that you'll use. In this case, we're going to start in Trailhead. We're going to find the student services card. So you have a lot of different cards in Trailhead. If you're having trouble finding the student services card, you can click on the view all cards, do a search for it. For the cards that you want to appear regularly, that you're constantly using, you can actually hit this little flag icon to save them to your home screen. So I often will do that with my cards. Once you're on that student services card, we will click the student self-service link. And from there, I encourage students to check out the information in the student profile at some point. We're not going to talk about that right now, but that has a lot of really handy information there, a lot of good links on this page. But in this case, we're going to click on View Transcript, and we're going to select our level and type and hit Submit, and that's going to pop up our unofficial transcript. Um, when you're in your transcript, oh, I lost my little link here. Just one moment, please. I'm going to pop over. Hang on just one second. And pause my share. Sorry for the disruption. Just one second here. Okay, and now we're back. Okay, so when you are in your transcript here, the first thing we want you to do is notice that the transcript is going to be divided out by your institutional type. So you are going to see if a course coming in as a direct Minds course equivalent, you will see the Minds course number and course title. So you can see that here with the statics course, this is what the course number and title is here at Minds. If a course does not transfer one for an existing Minds course, or it requires some further departmental review to make that decision, it will transfer to Minds as a course that ends in XX. So we're going to see that here with the free 1XX, which stands for free elective. Another common example that we're going to see is the Haas 2XX. So that's a humanities and social science elective, which can fulfill a culture and society mid-level elective requirement, which is part of your core curriculum here at Minds. One other thing you might see commonly is this Haas 110 and Haas 111 credit. You need both of those completed to be awarded Haas 100 credit. So if you have just one of those and not both, Haas 100 is a required course here at Minds, so there will be additional requirement that you will need, and you can learn more about that in our Canvas site or by talking to your CASA advisor. So that's something I encourage you to look out for in your transcript as well. Looking through your transcript really carefully, we just want you to make sure that it aligns with the credit that you're expecting to receive. And if you do believe that credit could be missing, we want you to pop on over to the registrar's website. So that's minds.edu/registrar. And under the student tab, you can go to the transfer credit information. This is just the general transfer credit information, but it's helpful to get a sense of what is required for courses to transfer back to Minds. And after you take a look at that, if you still believe some transfer credit is missing, then we would encourage you to contact transfer@minds.edu with your questions. We do want you to review those courses that transferred as free elective really carefully. If you see a course or credit that's reflected as free elective and you think that maybe it should be reviewed for possible transferability towards a more specific degree requirement, then that's where you would follow the transfer course approval process. And that's outlined on the registrar's website as well. And you can get to the form for that process on the Forms tab. So take a look at that information. The earlier you start that process, the better. You're also welcome, of course, to consult with your CASA advisor really at any time if you're just not sure. But CASA just doesn't evaluate credit. So we can definitely take a look and let you know what the next best steps would be based on your individual situation. And of course, emailing transfer@minds.edu will get you to that transfer specialist within the registrar's office that can also help with those types of questions. So after you've reviewed the credit you've received, your next step is going to be to better understand your degree requirements at Mines. So one thing you might have already have heard of or received some information about is DegreeWorks. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. But really, the first place we want you to go from an academic advising perspective is to start with a catalog. So that's catalog.mines.edu. The catalog is really an official repository for degree requirements, for lots of policies and important procedures here related to your academics. So take some time to scroll throughout, but today we're going to focus on major and degree requirements. So to get to those, we're going to start at the undergraduate tab, academics, and then academic programs. And then you're going to see a list of all of the majors offered here at Mines. And you can choose to look for the majors that you're most excited about exploring. If you are an exploratory student, by the way, I would just like to give a little shout out and plug to the welcome webinar that's being hosted by the Career Center in a couple weeks, because they are going to really focus in on how you can make some of those decisions about selecting a major. But once we click into the major, you're going to get a little bit of information on the objectives and learning outcomes. So that's kind of helpful if you are comparing a few different majors to learn more about what they really expect you to have and know when you graduate with that major. And then you can click into the major tab to get to the list of major specific requirements. So you can see that they will be listed out in a 4-year plan. So it starts with the first full year, not divided out by semester. And then after that first year, it divides out into a sort of semester by semester plan for a 4-year graduation. So as transfer students, you are likely to have some of this already complete. So going into those first few semesters and looking at what you might be missing is always a good place to start. But we really want you to look ahead as well to figure out if there's anything you might need to make sure you're enrolling this fall semester, because it is a critical prerequisite or part of a prereq chain that will impact your future semesters. So there could be some cases where it's maybe more important to take a class further down the sequence than something you see in the first year because it's a more time-sensitive prereq. So maybe you have the prerequisites transferred in to jump into everything you see in this fall semester of the sophomore year, but you don't have this Haas 100 completed. So that might be something you want to start to look into prereqs to see which is more important. And if you have any questions about that, that's really what we're here in CASA to help you out with, to help you determine what the best procedure would be to move forward with those courses. So we can look at prerequisites by clicking on the hyperlinked course code, and that will give us the course description as well as any prerequisite information. So prerequisites are courses that need to be taken before you take the course, as well as co-requisite information. And at Mines, that would be any courses that you would need to either take at the same time or before you take the course. Prerequisites, just a little information on those. For prerequisites, if no grade is listed, so some will have a specific grade, it could say a certain course with a C- or better. If no grade is listed, then you must have either successfully transferred the course or passed it with a D- or better here at Mines. So another important thing to know that at Mines, some courses are only offered once per academic year. So especially if you get into these major specific courses a little bit further down the line. So if you see a class in the 4-year schedule that's shown in the fall semester, there's a pretty good chance that class will be offered in fall. But if you wanted to jump ahead and maybe enroll in a class you see in spring semester, that, of course, you can always check the current class schedule, and we'll talk about how to get to that later on. But if you are working on a semester by semester plan and you want to kind of plan ahead and move things around from the semesters that you see them pictured in the catalog, unfortunately, there's not a really great way to check which semester course is offered in the catalog right now. There's been some updates. So sometimes you'll see a Roman numeral indicating which semester a course is offered, but a lot of that information has been removed. So if you don't see that information, it's really a good idea to connect with potentially your CASA advisor or academic department, and they can help you understand where courses can be moved because, for example, this Intro to Thermo is offered in both fall and spring semesters, but this Organic Chemistry 1 lecture is only offered in fall and summer semesters. So things like that. So, on the note of talking to your academic departments, some departments will host academic advising information right there on their website. Sometimes they'll have these things called flow sheets that really describe prerequisite information or prerequisite relationships. And in this case of mechanical engineering, they even have some like really handy advising tips specifically for transfer students. So encourage students, I know this is one of the biggest majors, so a lot of you on the call might be interested in that major, to check out some of the information that they do have online. But we want you to be, as you're doing that, we really want you to be mindful of the academic catalog and cross-checking information back with your catalog. So your catalog year is associated with the year that you started at Mines, and catalog requirements can change from year to year. So you need to look at dates and really making sure you're following your specific catalog information. And if there are discrepancies, often that catalog is going to be the final word, but there are some caveats. So we really want you to feel empowered if you see any differences between the catalog and other materials that are out there to really let us know and get that clarification. So for example, if we go into their handy little flow chart that they have here, we can see it right at the top. This is actually written for the 2025, 2026 catalog. So there may not be many changes, but that would be something where we would want you to be like, oh, okay, it says 2025, 2026. I better check back with the catalog and make sure that it is in alignment. Okay. So at this point, we're learning a little bit about our transfer credit, our degree requirements, and how do we put them together. So that is where DegreeWorks is going to come in. So DegreeWorks, you can get to that from your, oops, sorry. Here we go. From the DegreeWorks card in your Trailhead account. And DegreeWorks, hopefully you've already checked this out already. But when you open it up, it's going to be a little bit similar to this. This is a PDF export, so a little bit different than your live version. But you can see that your DegreeWorks degree evaluation, sometimes we call it a degree audit, is really just a checklist of all your major requirements and where you are individually with that list. So you can see it is divided out into a few different sections, and we can see if a requirement is complete with that green check mark, in progress with the blue half semicircle, or red means that it is not complete yet. So when you're reviewing DegreeWorks, if you're expecting your transfer credits to populate in a certain way and they aren't, please connect with your advisors to discuss so they can explore that with you and let you know about any next steps, as we mentioned earlier. DegreeWorks, again, should be matching what's in the catalog, but occasionally there can be differences, like maybe, for example, a new elective's been approved by the department for a future catalog, and they wanted to backdate that to be approved for students on older catalogs. You might not see that update in the catalog, but they updated DegreeWorks to make things easier for students so they didn't have to go through approval paperwork. So we encourage students, again, to be really cross-checking and letting your advisor know if you see anything you have questions about in DegreeWorks. And while we're talking about tools, we just wanted to give a quick note on AI. So we know many students may be used to consulting with AI tools like Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, and so forth for various questions. Because rules and policies and academic programs are nuanced and they can change from year to year, there is a good chance that AI tools will give you incorrect or incomplete information if you ask them advising questions. So we literally just had this conversation with advisor the other day. Within the last couple of weeks, they had a couple of students come in with plans they had developed with ChatGPT, and they just had a lot of wrong information in them. So we currently recommend students to not use AI for advising questions, and instead really focus on the tools we'll talk about today, like the catalog, DegreeWorks, and another tool, Smart Plan, we're going to get to in just a minute here, and your advisor. Okay, so our next step is to get ready for registration. So to that end, We mentioned submitting final transcripts. If you haven't submitted those yet or are currently enrolled in those kind of summer classes outside of Minds, then you might need to request temporary prerequisite overrides to get enrolled. So, for example, if you are taking Physics 1 this summer semester and plan to take Physics 2 in the fall at Minds, and you don't have that credit officially awarded, you're going to encounter registration errors when you go to register for Physics 2. So we have an article here that kind of describes exactly what you need to do to request the temporary override. If it's a Colorado Community College System course that you're taking right now, we have an automated form that will just really quickly get you access. For other classes, we want you to touch base with our registrar's office at transfer@minds.edu you just to make sure the course will transfer before we put in that temp override for you. So you can read the information there. We do still need the final transcript and for the credits to be officially awarded by the start of fall semester for you to stay enrolled in the course. So in case it was not clear yet, you will be registering yourself for fall semester. So registration is going to open on Monday, June 15th at 9 a.m. And to register yourself, you're going to have a couple options. So Smart Plan, which is a newer registration and planning tool, and Self-Service Banner, which is a system that I think is going to feel pretty familiar to a lot of students based on your transfer institution's system. So you can use either Smart Plan or SSB to register. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go into really detailed demo of those tools, but all the information that you need to use these tools is listed right here in this Canvas site. So we have articles about SmartPlan, we have a short video tutorials, and so forth. To give you a brief idea, I'll just pull up a couple screenshots. But the one thing that I wanted to start with was just a quick overview of SmartPlan. So SmartPlan um, is a new tool that it is unique in that it uses your personal DegreeWorks evaluation requirements to project a semester by semester completion plan. So you can then customize that plan by changing the number of credits for a given semester, or by moving classes around, or by choosing elective options and so forth. And then you can actually register for classes right from the plan. So it's pretty handy in that it has a lot of things all in one. If you do want to use this tool, and we definitely encourage you to be checking it out, we again want you to cross-check with the catalog and think critically and check with your advisors if you notice any discrepancies or have any questions. So for example, one thing we've noticed SmartPlan likes to do is encourage folks to take a bunch of electives in the same semester. So they might suggest, oh, take a couple of your majors electives and a bunch of CASA electives all in one semester, those culture and society electives. It's not technically wrong, but it wouldn't always be something that we would advise. So if you do notice those things that don't look like they quite really align with what the catalog's suggesting, that's when we would really encourage you to check in with your CASA advisor. Another thing about SmartPlan, we have also found that once your initial schedule is built, it is usually easier to switch over to Self-Service Banner to make edits, like switching a class section time. But again, you can use either tool at any time. So you can see some really helpful information here. We really encourage you to read through that SmartPlan first-time user guide and registration guide to get more information about those about the SmartPlan tool and how to register with it. A big thing with SmartPlan is really just making sure you are making sure to reset to declared plan each time you go into SmartPlan and clicking on this advice button at the top. Those two buttons are really going to make sure that you're getting the most accurate and most up-to-date information from our student information systems. With the Banner self-service registration, you are going to have a few different options with that. With that with Banner self-service, you're going to access that in Trailhead, and you are going to go to the student services card like we showed before and click on student registration. And from there, you can plan ahead. So before the 15th, you'll be able to develop a plan if you would like. And once the 15th rolls around and you can actually add, drop, and withdraw from classes, we have short tutorials on how to do that here. So maybe you're like, okay, all that's great, but I really just want to talk to someone one-on-one about my plan and a question that I have for fall classes. So in the Canvas site here, you can click on this article for obtaining one-on-one registration assistance. We are going to have drop-in hours on Monday and Tuesday, so the days that registration first opens, for quick questions that are specific to fall 2026 registration. So that would be things like, which of these classes that I'm considering taking is the most important for me to take in fall? Or should I add an extra class to be at 17 credits? Or do you think I need to, I think I need to be in this class this fall, but maybe I'm not seeing it in the course schedule. So all those things that are really relevant and pertinent to your immediate fall schedule would be things that we would be wanting to help you out with drop-ins. We're typically really busy at the beginning and then tend to trickle off a little bit as we go into the sessions. You can join at any time within the sessions. If you can't make it to those, or you just have some longer questions that you really want to address about some big goals, like things like adding in a minor or a combined graduate program, those are typically going to be longer conversations. So we would ask you to book an appointment for those. So we are an appointment-based office outside of pre-scheduled drop-in times. So you can learn more about how to do that in this article as well. When you're making your appointment, just make sure to, when you're on our scheduling page, look for the majors that you're most interested in first, and then look for your last name, and then you should see your advisor's scheduling link. So advisors will meet with students both online and via the Zoom platform, person. So just make sure you're also selecting the right appointment type for the modality that you would prefer to meet in. And we are anticipating some potential staff transitions. So if you don't see someone listed for your last name temporarily when you come to the site, don't worry. We do still have folks that really want to help connect with you and meet with you, but we just typically will have you start by emailing casa@mindset.edu. Okay, so at this point, I'm going to take a step back and talk a little bit about how students work with their CASA advisors. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the PowerPoint back to you, Nick, if you can get that going again. Okay, next slide. Great. So CASA advisors are there to help you with setting your academic goals, creating a semester by semester plan, course selection questions, navigating and overcoming academic challenges, really just helping you understand rules and policies and getting you connected to other offices and resources. You will be eventually also assigned to a faculty mentor. And that faculty mentor is someone who's really going to have that in-depth subject matter expertise so they can help you with those kinds of advising questions. For example, maybe you need some recommendations on really specific electives or out of class experiences based on your individual goals. Your faculty mentor can be really great for those kinds of questions as well. Next slide. When you're meeting with your advisor, we expect you to be proactive and take ownership. But that said, if you're feeling lost, don't hesitate to reach out, don't hesitate to connect and meet with your advisor. Really, just the more research and preparation you can do ahead of time is going to benefit you and make your advising appointment a little more efficient, maybe a little bit more useful. So, encourage you to write down questions and be ready to take notes. And when your advisor asks how things are going in your classes, we definitely want you to feel very comfortable in answering honestly. Our advisors are not going to be judgmental. They really, truly are there to help you. And that goes for if you have questions and you don't quite feel like you're understanding what your advisor is sharing with you, please let them know. Next slide. Okay, so here is a potential first semester schedule. And the point here is not the specific classes, since those are really going to vary based on the credits you're coming in with and your major, but thinking of all that time that you are not in class. So for some folks, it could look like it's a lot of time, but let's go to the next slide. So one of our student workers put this together based on their own experience, and it might be if the font's really tiny. It is really just to give you an idea of all the things you might be likely to be engaged with outside of class. So for each credit hour you're enrolled, we want you to be kind of thinking roughly in the span of like 2 to 3 hours outside of class for study. So we can see that represented here with some explicit study time, but also with professor office hours, with CASA tutoring that this student plans to visit. And we also want you to make sure that you're making time for activities and friends, and eating and sleeping and all those important things, potentially work on campus or campus leadership opportunities. So as you are making your schedule next month, we really want you to be thinking about that as well. On the note of making your schedule, we do encourage you to have your schedule roughly complete by July 1. You can definitely make changes up until the start of classes and encourage you to check out the academic calendar that's hosted by the Registrar's website to learn about important dates for adding and dropping classes as well as withdrawal deadlines. But we encourage you to have that schedule made by July 1st so that that's about roughly when we start adding first years into classes. So making sure you get your seats before first years start to be added. Next slide. So in addition to academic advising, we offer academic support services like tutoring and our academic recovery class, Bounce Back. So I don't have a lot of time to get into those, but we encourage you to explore and reach out if you have questions. In addition to our office, there's a lot of campus academic support across different offices. So we also encourage students, if they are having any questions about how do I get a little more assistance with this goal or that goal, to really connect with our CASA advisors. They can help point you to some of those really great resources. And with that, we can go to the next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Ariel Rainey with our Registrar's Office team. So the Registrar's Office manages the course schedule and many of the technical systems used for registration, among many other important functions that they will tell you a little bit right now. They're also right down the hall from CASA in the Student Center, so that's going to be handy for those times where we do need to refer students back and forth between our offices. I know that I covered the CASA content really quickly, so I do encourage you all to pop into the Q&A again with follow-up questions, and really also encourage you to check out that Canvas site in full, because in addition to the module at the front with all the steps for transfer students, there's a really robust Q&A section for what to do if you're encountering full classes, or what to do if you're encountering registration errors. So encourage you to check that out as well. And with that, I will turn it over to Ariel.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Jenny. We're so excited that you're joining us at Minds. My name's Ariel Rainey, and I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the services we offer so you know what to expect from our office. So we do maintain student records. So we process FERPA release forms to manage who can and cannot have access to your student record. You can find that form under our registrar website under forms. Obviously, another main function of our office is registration. So we publish that schedule of classes. That's usually about a month prior to when registration opens for that term. And we send communications along with CASA to help prepare you for registration each term so you know what to expect and what you might need to do in order to best be prepared. We can also assist with those questions regarding Smart Plan and Banner for registration, offering that technical support, which in those two registration options are available through Trailhead. Trailhead is available through my.minds.edu, as well as other Minds applications like DegreeWorks or Canvas, which you'll use for classes. You know, as Jenny stated, these are really your main hubs for accessing software at Minds. And we also publish grades. Those are available the Tuesday following the last day of finals. Um, we use third parties for managing enrollment verifications and official transcripts. When you select either process on our website, you'll be redirected to the applicable party to start that process. And then we are also the ones who make adjustments and exceptions for your degree works evaluations, and that's based on approval for departments. So we are really just the processing step for that. And once you see 90 credits completed, we will reach out to recommend you apply to graduate. Our graduation team notifies students when you reach that point, and we'll make you aware of the process in order to do so. You can move to the next slide, Nick. And so just a couple other registrar services are the residency and in-state tuition classification process and certifying your VA education benefits. So for out-of-state students petitioning for in-state residency, we have the process and requirements outlined on our website. For in-state students, if you haven't already, make sure you've applied for COF on their website and then authorize that usage of COF at Mines. Process is also outlined on our website. And for any students using veterans benefits, if you haven't already, you definitely want to make sure you reach out to veterans at mines.edu so you can start the process of making sure your benefits are applied to Mines, especially since you submit your benefit request form each term and you're not automatically certified, as I believe some institutions do. You want to be aware of all the applicable steps involved in that process. So yeah, those are some of the things that we can assist you with, and feel free to browse our website for additional information and the contact emails to reach out to for each of these functions.
All right. So, thank you to both Jenny and Ariel for going over these processes. And as I've seen kind of come through, we have a handful of questions that we're now going to take some time to have both Jenny and Ariel answer as it applies to their specific departments. So, we have a decent amount of time left today to be able to answer some of these questions. So, we'll start. And the way it'll work is first, just FYI, on the screen, you'll see both contact information for both CASA and the registrar's office. So make sure that you take a picture or write these information down. They're good numbers and emails to have as you have questions about registration and the process to which your degree works comes in and all your classes from previous institutions look like. So make sure you get this information on the screen down so that you can easily contact these offices with your specific questions after we meet today. Okay, so we're gonna go now into the Q&A session, and as I told you all earlier, I will try my best to be able to get through all these questions. But then again, if we don't have enough time, make sure that you're reaching out directly to the offices with the information on the screen. Okay, so we have a couple questions around um, when transcripts are due, and especially if a student's institution does not submit the transcripts before the deadline here, what should they do? So, specifically, um, let's see. A student is in their third quarter and will not have final grades back for another 2 weeks, and they're attending summer courses at a foreign university for language. How will this impact their ability to register for classes? And also, if transcripts are not due until um, July 1, will that be a problem if they're taking summer courses right now? So basically, what should folks do if they cannot get their transcripts into Minds by the right date? And how does it work if they're taking summer classes? All those kind of questions are a common question that we're seeing come through.
Yeah, so for classes that are currently in progress, for summer, you can do that temporary prerequisite override waiver to allow the override to populate so you can get registered for any class that might need the class you're currently in as a prerequisite. But for the credit to officially post, you obviously want to get that transcript into us as soon as your grades are published and your course is completed so that it can officially post. Um, and then just for, you said there was one other transcript related question, Nick. let's see.
Yeah, they just if yeah, what should they do if they can't get the transcript by the deadline that mine's posts, basically was the questions.
Yeah, I think the tip prereq waiver is the best thing because really the transcript is likely going to impact what you're able to register for the upcoming term. So the temporary prereq override will allow you to do that in the meantime. Come the start of the term, though, you will need to have your transcripts in order to stay in the class. So you'll start getting notifications and reminders to get those transcripts submitted. So even if you don't get them in by the deadline, you can still get registered for courses that may still rely on those transcripts as prerequisites, but you want to be diligent in getting that in at the start of the term so that you stay in the class and the credit officially post.
If
Okay,
it
thank you.
is absolutely not possible to get that final transcript in by that start of class after you start getting those notices, that's when you would need to submit a registration action form. And that would be up to the department to approve to allow you to stay in the class without the courses officially been awarded credit. So that process is described also in the Canvas site. So the Canvas site in that first module, you can see the link to the temporary prereq form and information for filling that out. And then in the FAQ, you can see more information about the registration action form process.
All right, thank you. Jenny, you showed on your screen kind of the flow plan for mechanical. Are there
Mm-hmm.
flow plans for all the majors, or where can somebody find like the flow plan for various majors, or is
Mm-hmm.
it just mechanical that has one, for example?
A lot of the other majors do, not all of them, but many of them do. So if you're not seeing it on their website, that's something you might email your CASA advisor and ask if they could send it to you if it exists, or reach out to the academic department. As you move along in your time here at Mines, you might get to start to be added to major specific Canvas sites. So of course we have that Canvas site for incoming students that's really general, but then you'll start being added to more major specific sites if your department has one. So they often will have that kind of information listed there. And typically transfer students would be added around August, September to those kinds of materials. So there's a few different ways, but if it's something you're really wanting to take a look at now and see if it exists for your major, you can email your advisor to ask them about that.
Perfect. Okay. Do students need all of their transcripts submitted before they're able to register for classes?
You don't need all your community college transcripts submitted prior to registration. I mean, the main impact is your ability to register for classes where it's relying on those courses as a prereq. But I do believe with high school, you do need that submitted, or you'll have a registration hold added to your record if you don't have your high school transcripts.
We have a question from a transfer student who um, they have credit for classes like Calc 2 and Physics 2 already, but they want to actually take those classes at Mines, but Smart Plan removes them from their schedule when they add
Mhm.
them because I think they already have the credit for them. So how does a
Mhm.
student go about maybe rejecting the credit from a previous institution?
So there is a form to do that on the registrar's website, but we do encourage students to really think before they submit that form, because if you submit the form to decline credit, it is final, and you can't get it back. So we encourage you to reach out to the department offering the class, talk to them, maybe get a syllabi for the course, compare it with your past knowledge, and really think, and use that departmental expertise to make that decision on if you want to decline the credit. If you ultimately make that decision to decline the credit, um, even before you do that, you can use the Banner self-service to register for the class. So you can just skip the Smart Plan piece and register via Banner self-service for the course that you're planning on retaking. But eventually you would need to submit that form to decline the credit, since you can't have credit for the same course or be awarded multiple credit, if that makes sense.
All right, we have a question about a student who's actually sort of marked as a first year student, but they're actually a transfer student in this system. So does the student need to do something now to be able to register or get that fixed so they're actually registered, like they're actually labeled the correct student type in the system?
So they're marked as a first year student, but they're truly a transfer student. So
Mm,
they've completed at least, I believe it's something like 12 credits post high school, college credits post high school. If that's the case, I would encourage you to reach out to admissions.mines.edu because they manage the processing of what type students should go in as. So they would be able to take a look and make sure that that's truly an accurate and make the update. Um, After that conversation with admissions, if you're still having issues, I would encourage you to reach out to CASA at Minds.edu or the registrar's office so we can take a look and make sure you have a time ticket that matches your admissions type. Ariel, would you have anything else
Yeah,
to
I
add
was
with that?
just thinking, in addition, you likely will want to reach out to them before Monday when registration opens for transfer students because incoming freshmen do not register themselves at the same time transfer students do. We kind of manage that registration for them, so your registration ability will be impacted unless that student type gets updated.
This question kind of talking about starting on Monday with transfer registration. Can you just talk a little bit about um, the actual opening of registration on this coming Monday and what that looks like, and when students can start getting into the system and actually registering for classes? There's a couple questions that kind of focus around that.
Yeah, I mean, so starting at 9, that's when you'll be able to actually go into those tools and actually click those registration buttons. So in Smart Plan, you can start messing around, setting up your schedule, or you can go into that banner plan ahead and start setting up a temporary schedule, but you just won't be able to click into registering until your registration time ticket opens on Monday at 9. So it's really that time is when you get access to the system. And then we do encourage you to reach out to the registrar if you're having technical issues after 9 a.m. that morning. If you just have some questions about what classes to take and want to troubleshoot some things with an advisor, that's why we have those drop-ins set up. If you don't mind, if I can just share my screen one more time, I can show you just really quick. So when you're in your trailhead, you have that button to access Smart Plan. And then when you're in your Smart Plan, then you'll see again those advice and reset to declare plan, like I mentioned. But this change is where you can start updating different classes, and the update registration button that's where you're going to be able to start doing that when your registration time opens. And when it comes to the banner self-service, if you prefer that, you're going under that student registration. And right now, you'll have access to this prepare for registration button. If you wanted to look up holds, look up just some general information that's helpful, you'll have access to that plan ahead. If you wanted to start building a draft plan, and again, there's tutorials for that in the Canvas site, you'll have access to this browse classes if you just want to start skimming the schedule. It's this register for classes link. That's what will open on the 15th.
All right. This might be for Ariel, but when is the due date for cough?
Oh, yeah, for cough, you you'll basically apply through College Assist and authorize at Mines before classes start, but you can do that up through the end of the term. Um, and so, yeah, just reach out to residency at Mines for any assistance with that.
All right. There's a question about if there's going to be any opportunities for major specific advising prior to registration opening next week. This particular student has some questions about major specific classes and just wants to chat and get some advice. So I know, Jenny, you mentioned that there's a couple of Zoom kind of walk-in advising or connecting on Zoom advising next week. Was there anything else prior to the 15th?
So prior to the 15th, we'd encourage you to be using those tools that we mentioned. So I want you to be going to the catalog, looking at your major specific pages, looking through the Canvas site, prepping those questions. And then if you want to go ahead and you know you're going to have like you have like a ton of questions and you really want to just sit through and talk with someone, go ahead and pre-book a meeting for after the 16th because you can change your schedule up until the start of classes. So you can make that draft schedule on the 15th, maybe come to drop-ins and get a couple quick questions answered. But if you have that meeting set up for later in the month of June and you and your advisor decide you need to make some changes, you can do that then. So I know you're really excited to meet with advisors, but that's sort of the game plan.
A couple questions about AP credit scores. So it sounds like they have sent their scores to Mines about 2 weeks ago and haven't had an update. And the scores have been posted. Is there an update on when you anticipate being able to see the scores or post the scores from AP?
I know we usually get those at the beginning of July. We'll have all like in a bulk upload from College Board. So I would say if you're not seeing it after that date, we can revisit and see what might be going on.
So if you're relying on those AP scores for prerequisite credit for like Calculus 1 so that you can get enrolled in Calculus 2, if it's on that AP table that's listed on the registrar's office and you've been awarded the score, go ahead and assume you're going to be awarded that credit and fill out that temporary prereq override form that we mentioned. And then just make sure come July that you're double checking to make sure everything was awarded the way you expected.
Perfect. Can you describe the difference between HOS 215 and HOS 200 for transfer students?
Yeah, so we have an article that talks a little bit more about this in the Canvas site. So Haas 215 Futures is the required course on the 2026-2027 catalog that all students on this call are on. So that is the course that all mine students are required to take. It is a really interdisciplinary course that is focused on really important future problems to the world, like climate change and carbon capture and things like that. Um, that said, the previous course that it replaced, Haas 200 Global Studies, was a common transfer course. So students who already have that Haas 200 transfer credit, to smooth this sort of transition between Global Studies Haas 200 to Haas 215 being the required course, we will allow that to your Haas 200 credit to replace the Haas 215. So if you've already taken that course and you're like, I was not planning on taking this new class, sounds great, but I wasn't planning on taking that, that's fine. You should see that automatically awarded in your degree works. You do have the option to take CAS 200 Global Studies now as a mid-level CAS, Culture and Society elective. So if you like the sound of that CAS 215 and you do have that Global Studies credit, you can apply that as mid-level CAS elective and still take the Futures course, the HAS 215. We do encourage students to take the HAS 215, that Futures course. If you haven't taken the credit yet, try to take it earlier in your curriculum if you can, just because it is kind of one of those classes that can help give you a taste of some different disciplines and help you maybe chart more of the direction you want to go in the future at Mines. So our faculty have really tried to design it to be like that. So that is kind of a neat way to get exposed to more things at Mines if you have not, if you don't have that global studies credit. I hope that makes sense, but do read through that article in Canvas. And if you have some additional questions, follow up with your advisor or email casa@mines.edu. Ariel, do you have anything from the registrar perspective on that?
No, I think you summarized that pretty well, just in terms of how those two classes compare, but thank you.
All right, we have a question about students wanting to know if they need to apply for both a transfer course approval and a temporary course override for classes designated with the free XXX. that they're still waiting for a grade on. They just want that to be applied to a specific degree requirement. So they're just asking if they need to do both forms or just one form. What makes sense in this situation?
So it's a course coming in as free elective, but they're hoping that it's going to be awarded as a higher level degree credit and in turn would be a prereq for something else that they need to register for, I think is what I'm hearing. I
Yeah.
would start first with a transfer course approval process, because we really want to make sure that that course will come in as you expect before we fill out the temporary prereq override. Ariel, I don't know if you would differ with that or if anyone else from the registrar's office would differ with
Yeah,
that.
no, I would agree with that. Just, based off of getting an understanding of the expectation of what that course, how it will apply under your curriculum, that makes the most sense.
Okay. There's a student in the chat that has the states that in their trailhead, it states that the time ticket is not provided. Time ticket is required to register. What does that entail for that student if they don't see a time ticket for the registration?
You likely won't see it yet. Come Monday, your registration time, you all will definitely have your time tickets, but we will be getting those time tickets uploaded for all the incoming transfers this week. So you'll be able to register on Monday.
And for all transfer students on this call, registration will open at the same time at 9 a.m. So you don't have to worry too much about that. It would just be in future semesters. When you go to register for spring, you're likely going to have different registration times based on your number of credits. So that's when that becomes a little more important to understand your exact time.
We just have a student who's wondering who they find out their advisor is for the quantum systems engineering major.
Oh, great question. So quantum systems engineering, brand new for the next catalog. So we just haven't had a chance to update our website yet. In the meantime, we would like you to just email CASA at mines.edu if you're going to be a quantum systems engineering major, and we'll email you a webinar that was run with the department so you can get some major specific information about that new major since there isn't as much online about that yet. And then we'll get you connected to the right person. But if you come to drop-ins, we'll get you routed to the right person as well. But in the meantime, I would just email CASA at mines.edu if you wanted to schedule a longer appointment.
Okay, thank you. All right, for time's sake, I'm going to move us along. I recognize that we may have not gotten to all of the questions that you had. I see some of our staff is in the question and answer section answering some questions right now as well. But again, if we don't get an answer to your question today and you're still left with some questions, please go back to this page right here and write this information down, the phone numbers and the emails and the websites for both the CASA office and the registrar office. They are gonna more than happy to help answer questions as they come up for you. And again, make sure that you read through the Canvas page that Jenny talked a lot about. I think it'll be very helpful and have a lot of information in there for you to help kind of guide you through the registration process. But know that you're not alone, so please pick up the phone or send an email for sure if you have questions before you register next week. Just real quick, I want to go over a couple reminders for you all as we wrap up our time together today. I want to make sure that you know about some upcoming webinars that we have the rest of the summer. This is only the second webinar that we have. We have several webinars throughout the summer that are all going to be, you can attend live or watch the recordings of after the fact, all of which are going to be helpful in your transition to Mines as a transfer student. The next one, though, is specifically for families. It's on Tuesday, June 16th at 5 p.m. Colorado time, and it'll feature a panel of current students. The next webinar for students, incoming students, will take place on Monday, June 22nd at 4 p.m. Colorado time. It'll focus on exploring your major and career choices. That'll be a great webinar to attend to learn more about that process here at Mines. Another couple of reminders as well. Make sure that you're completing your Order Your Next Steps checklist in your admissions portal. There's important dates and deadlines for you to be following, submitting forms, and making sure everything is correct and sent into Mines for your arrival in August. And please, please, please continue to check your Mines email throughout the summer for important information from our office. and other campus partners as you prepare to arrive on campus in August. So, once again, thank you so much for your time today and for being with us. Please reach out to these offices if you have specific questions. But thank you for your time. And we will post the recording of this webinar on our website in a few days once we get the recording finalized. It'll be posted on our welcome webinar section of our website. You're welcome to go back and review this at any point in that time once we have the video posted. But again, welcome to Minds. We're so excited that you're here with us. We can't wait to welcome you to campus in August. And please have a good rest of your day. Take care.